Ugh. It Takes You Away, penultimate episode for Series 11 of Doctor Who, and this one's different. I think the main thing I want to be clear right off is I do think I like it overall, and if nothing else, even if it doesn't totally come together, I admire the scope and ambition of it. What it isn't is it isn't dull, and it isn't lacking in imagination. So, like, I think the worst thing a Doctor Who episode could be is boring. So as long as it is still interesting, it's not a total failure to me. And I do find this interesting. I think if there's an issue, it's the fact that it's some conflicting, interesting things going on as it kind of stumbles its way along. I do find this episode oddly endearing, though. I'll try and hold off on the flat-out spoilers. I will get to them, though. So, like, if you want the most spoiler-free I can get, that's it. Like, I'm not entirely sure it works, but I still kind of like it. But that might just be because I'm weird and my tastes are weird. So, yeah, take that as the very bizarre, jumbled kind of almost endorsement that I guess it is. So, first off, the atmosphere at the front end, really impressive. There was a great sort of creepiness to it. You know, just starting out seeing the house all boarded up. It had the feel that I got off episodes like The Empty Child, just sort of that feeling of, okay, what's going on? And then the mirror was just a really cool effect. Like, looking in this mirror, like, wait, what, where are we? And I do kind of love that Ryan goes, we'd know if we were vampires, right? Because as silly as that sounds, like, that probably would have been my first thought too. I mean, like, I'm not a vampire, right? I don't think I'm a vampire. So all of that, and then it goes into like this whole other section in the anti-zone, which feels, in a way, feels different, but like it kind of oddly connects. So like I could break this whole thing into 3 fairly distinct chunks, yet it kind of oddly, for me at least, flows decently from one chunk to the next. So we've got our scary, tense, almost horror-esque setup. We've got the segment in the anti-zone, which is different, which feels different from that, but is kind of connected by the sense of tension. And then, but sort of the newness of the what is going on, where are we, sort of then connects us to the tail end of it in the sentient universe. And I'm just getting into spoilers at this point, so if you haven't already checked out, you might want to do that if you haven't seen the thing. I'm assuming you have. So there is like thin threads connecting each segment, but they are kind of tenuous connections. I don't know, man. This one's just weird. But coming back to the anti-zone, I like the general. It's saved by the guy that they encounter there, because the general feel of, you know, ooh, it's a cave, and ooh, killer moths. Like, I don't scoff at the killer moths. I think the idea of a moth that ignores clothes and eats flesh is actually kind of just a cool, very simple concept. But like, if it was just the cave and the moths, I'm like, I would consider it filler. But I like the guy who's there. I like him a lot. He reminded me a lot of Star Trek style alien, which is that he very clearly approaches everything from a different mindset from how people do. So like, to make the Star Trek comparison, how the Ferengi approach everything from the angle of what's the profit, how the Vulcans approach everything from what's most logical, how the Klingons approach everything from what is the most honorable warrior way to do this. This guy approaches everything from a perspective of food. And I've seen that go wrong. I've seen the Two Doctors. But so it's kind of cool to almost feel like it's revisiting that idea that didn't work back in the day, but sort of coming at it from an angle like, I kind of like hanging around this guy. You know, the way he describes anything he likes is delicious, and you know, I liked him. I liked his presence, and he livened up that middle segment that otherwise could have been a real drag on the whole episode. And then we get into the last section, which is very, for lack of a better comparison, it reminded me of A Wrinkle in Time. not just the movie, but the book. And that sort of feel of that more sort of pseudo-spiritual, new agey approach to science fiction. And the idea of a sentient universe that just wants to connect and doesn't want to be alone. It has that more, you know, explore the universe through the pathways of your mind kind of feel and approach to sci-fi, which Doctor Who doesn't do a ton of, but it's a thing that, I kind of grew up with that kind of, you know, 70s, 60s, new agey sci-fi kind of stuff. So I have an affinity for it. So again, like, I'm coming away going, I think I like this episode, but I totally get why most people might not, or at best they're going to be really confused by it. But for some reason, it just happened to like tick off the boxes that worked for me personally. And I think each segment is well done in and of itself. And the frog, boy, like I was really tempted as my opening kind of gag on this to pull a quote from The Good Place, but I thought A, it was too much of a spoiler, and B, it was a reference that not enough people would get. But I couldn't help think of the doorman from The Good Place. So like, yeah, it's a frog. I like frogs. I'm a frog guy. It's like, but again, it's kind of that like, okay, that's weird, but it's also very upfront with the fact that like, yeah, this is supposed to be weird. This is not supposed to be like, the universe is a frog. Well, no, of course that makes no sense. That's the point. It makes no sense. Go with it. And again, I think it's just because that kind of, you're gonna see something that these are pieces that don't fit together, but this is the best way your brain can make sense of it because the universe is too grand and crazy to ever make, for you to ever make total sense out of, which is actually kind of how I think in general. Like, my general approach to life is that, look, I'm not gonna throw my hands up and go, it's not worth trying to figure anything out, but I know I'm never gonna figure all this stuff out. Like, I can't, like, I'm incapable of. So I always have an affinity for the concept of, okay, no, it's not really this, but this is how you're perceiving it because this is the best you're ever gonna understand it. And it kind of, again, it kind of hit me on that vibe, the whole tail end section with the frog. And I kind of like the Doctor's reaction to it, a kind of melancholy of, oh yeah, that was never gonna work, but bit of a shame that. And Jodie Whittaker was good in this. I'm still not sure that I've had my moment, like the moment of that's the Doctor. But again, I'm not gonna go like, and that means she's no good in the part, because again, looking back on it, I didn't really have it for Capaldi for his entire first series, and by the time he was done, I loved Capaldi. So, you know, I'm not holding that against the show, but like I'm definitely on board with her at this point. I haven't had that moment where I'm like, that's the Doctor, like 100%, but I'm definitely not going like, that's not the Doctor. Like, no, it is. I'm just waiting for like my moment to like go, yes! And I haven't quite had it yet, but I'm enjoying her. Ryan and Graham, they're doing a good job of like, they've done a good job over the course of this series building their relationship, even across some of the episodes that I didn't like. I think that's, I mean, I'll talk about some of this stuff later when I do a Series 11 wrap-up, but I think the focus on inter-character relationships has been well handled, possibly at the expense of other stuff, but that's been well handled. I also think, like, I feel like I can finally nail down why Yaz isn't working for me for the most part. Because again, she's not bad in this episode, but something that happened twice in this episode that made me realize, oh, that's why she doesn't work for me, is they have to keep stopping and pausing to single out why she's good and why she should be there. Because they don't need to do that with Ryan and Graham because, well, Graham's just adorable and lovable. He's carrying a sandwich just in case, for crying out loud. And then Ryan has his own emotional arc and his growth and his through line and his relationship with Graham, which we're getting to just watch build and develop. So that justifies itself right there. Yaz, they keep having to go out of their way to justify. So like when Ryan points out, you were really good with that kid, And, you know, Yaz is like, well, you know, I've had training, you know, as a police officer. I had to stop and go, was she really good with that kid? Oh, I guess she was, but I didn't notice because there was way more interesting kind of organic stuff going on. And the show, and I feel like they realize that, and the show goes out of its way to go, hey, did you notice she was good at that? And I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess. It's a little frustrating you had to point it out. And then they kind of did it again with her being like, can't you reverse the polarity or something? I'm like, that's totally something the Doctor would have normally thought of on her own. But they gave it to Yaz. Again, it feels like they have to do a lot of extra legwork to try and justify Yaz and her value there. And that's not me saying that she is devoid of value, but they have to highlight it every single time. Whereas they don't have to do that with Ryan and Graham because it feels much more just growing out of their interaction that we see their value to the narrative, if not necessarily inherently to the Doctor. So I think I finally nailed down my issues with Yaz in basically every episode except the Demon of the Punjab. Other than that, the young girl who was blind, she was good. Like, my inclination would, I didn't look this up. I suspect she probably really is blind, because if she's not, her ability to unfocus her eyes is astounding. I suspect she probably actually is blind. And she did a good job. There was just, again, this is a weird episode. And from any objective stance, I'm not sure it works. Like, especially given where it ends versus where it begins. And again, they gave a very dumb name to an alien phenomenon. What was it? Salutrax? Like, I can't even remember. These things are fade from my mind. Whoever's picking the names, whether it's Chibnall or if it's a like the writers' room collectively voting on options, it would have been better to just not name the thing. But I find this one oddly endearing. Like, maybe if I were to compare, like, this is not a comparison of how the episode is at all, but like a comparison for me is like how I enjoy Robots of Sherwood quite a bit, but I know a lot of other people don't, and I kind of get why, but like it just happens to hit specific things that work for me, and I feel this kind of in the same way. Like, okay, I would not be surprised if like a bunch of people are either confused by this episode or they hate it. I like it, but it just happens to scratch weird itches for me. And again, what I will defend about it is, even if it doesn't connect with you, like, it's not unimaginative and it's not boring. It swings for the fences. Whether or not you think it managed to connect or not, that's another thing. But I'm surprised. Like, the more that I think of, once it ended, I was like, I don't know what to make of that. But the more I think about it and now talking about it, like, no, I did like that. It's weird and it's weird and wonky, but I like it. Huh. Okay, so it takes you away. What are your thoughts on? I'll be really curious to hear people's thoughts on this one, because again, my suspicion is I will probably like it a lot more than most other people. But love to find out what the case actually is. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. A whole bunch of stuff you can do, because there's buttons and there's links, including one to my Patreon, if you want to support me in that fashion. If you don't worry about it. Other links you can check out. Don't want to check those out? Don't have to worry about that either, because at the end of the day, folks, you're the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.